Season 3, Episode 36. I'm Rolland. He's Chris Clough. This is the Decoded podcast where we complicate things and sometimes simplify things. We're getting close to the end of the school year, so I'm thinking, we probably will do one more podcast, and then the school year will be over. So we did 37 episodes, God willing, if it works out. 37 episodes is not bad. I think we've done more in the past, but this year's been weird.
Have we done more? And I think we've done more and less.
Oh,
have we done more and less? I'd have to check the feed, but I don't. I honestly, I think if we're somewhere around the 40 mark,
we're good, right? Yeah. Things happen, things pop up. So I want to start with the creepers.
The creepers.
I had a conversation with a colleague maybe 2 weeks ago. I just kept forgetting to bring it up with you. Maybe a week and a half or something. I don't know. Anyway.
That pretty much happens to me every week, dude. That I get off the line and I'm like, damn, I should write this stuff down.
I actually wrote a couple of things that I do want to talk about. So one of them is creepers. Maybe we can find a nicer term for them. But I was talking to a colleague, and the colleague made a comment, and I said, "You don't know anything about me." And the colleague said, "I do know a lot about you. Actually, I sometimes check out your podcast." I'm like, "Oh, so you're not a subscriber. You don't ever mention my podcast, but you're dropping it now." They're like, "Yeah. Okay, so I would like to formally say hello to the creepers listening in who will never tell us that they listen, who don't subscribe to the YouTube channel or anything like that. So welcome. Thanks for checking it out. Thanks for listening to bits and pieces of my life and then telling me you know about me after the fact." So I wanted to start off with that. Do you have anything to say about the creepers?
I do. Well, yeah, I'll take it in a different route.
Of course you will, because you always do.
Well, no, because it reminds me of I think it was maybe. It had to have been 2 years ago. Yeah, it was actually probably 3 years ago now. And an administrator, my administrator at the time, said, "Oh, I mentioned I came across your podcast." So this was squirrels, right? And came across squirrels, and I have a lot of. Never did anything to really promote it in my school board. Like it was just, but I knew these were the conversations I wanted to have. So most of the people in there are and still are really, they're cool and creative individuals in my school board, Wire DSP. So my principal said I came across it, noticed some of the names, recognized the people. And then asked me, and I don't know how to, I'll do my best to explain this, but asked me, are we allowed? It was either allowed or permitted. And I can't remember if the person said, "Are you allowed?" They may have said, "Are you allowed?" But the question was basically, it centers around, do we have ownership of our work life and our work details? Because the question was, are we permitted, or are we allowed to talk about work like that, the way that you're doing it? And I didn't take it as sort of like a double-edged question, like somehow they knew the answer and they were looking to see, Clough, do you realize do you even know if you're breaking the rules with this, or do your fellow staff mate think that you're breaking the rules with this? And it got me thinking about how and this is again 3 years ago, right? So yours and my process is so much not different, but like we've gone through evolutions since then. Like we're kind of further down this space of reflection in public. But it really got me thinking at the time about the perception of professional reflection. And, a lot of what we do and create is owned by the school board. Like that's just a fact. Like if you create a lesson binder and you choose to have, like, those resources are the school boards. You might choose to make copies, but the school board gets their copy of it. And I think that was kind of the spirit of what was being asked there. Like how much agency autonomy do we have, and how much ownership rights do we have even over how we discuss our work life? And that's kind of like the entry point to this. your comment though around having somebody kind of know things about you, that was a moment that I felt a different sense of connection to the audience, or who, because I think even with, somebody asked me this too, like with squirrels, and I don't know, maybe this question was asked to you for this, often when you engage in creating some sort of a media, or you write an essay, or you sort of create a piece of art, a question that could be asked is, who do you imagine is the audience? Like, who do you imagine is out there receiving this? And then you can, and actually Roy and Lee did an amazing job of kind of reconfiguring my thought fuel when he was one of my early episodes in that podcast, because he said he came into using social media as an individual that thought like he was just arriving at the party, and it was something that was already going on, and it was kind of like high energy, and then he kind of shifted it into a space where that wasn't this, I'm paraphrasing, and we're also, this is 2 or 3 years ago I had this conversation, but the essence was his thinking shifted into caring concern for his audience, as in he was more curious about building the relationships with the audience and sort of understanding who's out there and being cognizant of the fact that his voice going out there could have impact. Whether it did or it didn't wasn't the fact. It was just the possibility that it could. So that sort of created a little bit more of I think a clearer vision for him when he thinks about how he interacts with social media in general. So with that being said, in the podcast, having that conversation, and then having the conversation around, are we permitted to talk about our professional learning, our professional thoughts, and the intersectionality between, well, in our case, being a dad, man, human, teacher, like worker in multi-systems, how much ownership do we have over that information and our ability to sort of like share it out? And then now you have this kind of conversation with someone that's kind of lurking the feed. I don't know. It's funny because on one hand, so this is an educator. Is this an educator? Yeah. So yeah, Rolland says yes. So yes, I know.
I forget that people might actually listen to this rather than watch it. But it's all good, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of time you and I do our own sort of audio subtitles in a lot of ways. It's like Chris is holding something up to the camera right now. Rolland is nodding his head in affirmation. But it's like it's one of the things that really, like, I wish the stuff that we talked about could well, I hope it's interesting to people inside the EDU bubble. I could only hope that it would be interesting to someone outside the EDU bubble. Like, that's just like such a far off galaxy, kind of far away kind of a thing. So it is interesting when someone kind of comes up and says they know something about you, because there is something a little bit, I mean, depending on how they say it to you and the type of eye contact they hold, and I guess what your perception of the relationship is, I guess it could be a little unnerving. But we also chose to share these things.
Well, that's the cool thing. This is like the divide for me. It's still weird when people talk about stuff that we've talked about on the podcast. I don't know how to explain this, but I would love to try to figure it out. Like, I'd love to try to bottle how to explain what I'm about to say to you. I have no problem, as I sit here talking to you, doing this podcast, knowing it's live, knowing it's being recorded. I have no problem talking about a lot of personal topics, sharing like in the moment feelings or ideas that I experience while we're talking during this time. It is kind of strange when you run into somebody down the road and they're like, oh yeah, like I heard about what your English teacher did to you. I'm really sorry. And in that context, I think to myself, how do you know? I know how they know, but it's like,
no, but it's still,
I don't want to talk about that in this context. You get what I'm saying? Like, in this context, that what's happening right now, as you and I are talking, and I'm waving my hands around for those of you who aren't watching the YouTube feed, this is the right context for that conversation. And then when somebody pulls it out of their back pocket in creeper mode, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just mean that as someone who I don't know is listening. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I listen to your podcast sometimes, and I heard this and I hear that. And
is it lurker? Is it lurker? Is that the type?
It might be a lurker. I think
it's lurker. You know, it sounds pejorative, but I think it's just kind of like that's the person that just kind of,
they're just in and out.
Yeah, they read your feed. They're not a follower.
Yeah. It's all good.
You're like a fast food for them, a convenience food, right?
It's just I didn't get it until they said it. I'm like, oh, there are probably people who listen here and there and just keep moving, which that's totally cool. I do it too, right?
Yeah.
I try though, when I listen to a good podcast, and whatever that means for us, but because we might not be good, they just stumble upon it like this sucks and they move on. But when I listen to a podcast, I like to reach out to the people that I just listened to let them know that I listened. And to try and because I want them to know, just like I like to know when people listen to what we're talking about. It's not necessary, but it's kind of cool. So I like to do that to others. Anyway, going back to, so it's context, right? Like I can talk to you right now about what I'm talking to you right now, but over Facebook post or a Twitter message or a face-to-face conversation, somebody says to me, no, I know that about you already. I know more about you than you think. It's like, oh, I don't like this context, I don't think.
Well, that goes from lurker to creepy. So maybe that's the creeper layer, because it's sort of it becomes a power dynamic at that point, not a conversation.
But depends who it is too. Like with this particular person, it's harmless. Like it's not a big deal. But it's interesting. So I would love to term that discrepancy between the two. I think it has context is important, relationship is important, because when I'm talking to you on the podcast, I'm talking to my buddy Chris, who I met, 4 years ago or whatever. And
we met online.
But then we did meet face to face.
We did.
We had our face-to-face meeting, but you get what I'm saying though. Like we're buddies now. So it's, it's all good. But so for any creepers, or what did you call them? Lurkers. Hey, I'm going to drop.
I think that's the
visitors. Let's just call them visitors.
Okay. That doesn't sound good. Okay. You shape, who are you talking about right now? Just someone that would casually
talking about somebody who's just hit season 3, episode 36 because they just came across their feed or whatever. And
a lurker. A lurker, I don't take that as insulting at all. I think it's someone that just kind of like I think in some ways, for me, someone may counter this, but I don't know if there's any other term, because that would be whether it's your Twitter feed. If you have it unlocked, it's the people that just kind of like buzz around the light, right? They're around the bug light, kind of like they're just hanging out. They want to sort of like check a little bit of it out. They may stay, they may go. They haven't committed, so they haven't committed to the relationship yet.
Okay, so for any of those people, I'm about to tell you what one of my favorite numbers are, and then feel free to hit me up because then let's get some context. So one of my favorite numbers is 76. So I'm purposely putting that out there into the world. It's like the passcode. So if you see me, well, I don't know when anybody's ever going to see me again in person, but you run across.
Could be online though. Someone could approach you in, yeah.
Okay, so just drop the number 76, and then I will understand. It provides a context for me that I was talking about you, and now you're showing me who you are. So 76, there, I did what I wanted to do.
Can I do one?
Yeah, man.
Wednesday is my favorite day of the week. Okay. Not Tuesday, which is like another story altogether, but Wednesday is my favorite day of the week.
Okay. I would think it would be Tuesday because you were born on a Tuesday.
I was born on a Tuesday, but that's just a kind of matter of fact. But my actual favorite day that I have positive association with, always have, it's Wednesday. Okay. More so than the weekend, it's a Wednesday. So there's the safe word. We know if you come at us.
The passcode.
It's the passcode.
If anybody ever says to me now, oh, I ran into your podcast, I'm like, what's my favorite number? And if they don't answer me, I don't think I'm going to engage them and talk about the podcast.
Here's the thing.
And I'm sorry, you don't know what you need to know for us to engage in this conversation.
We've already mentioned though, like we're somewhere probably around somewhere between 130, 140 episodes, and this is like that's okay. Hopefully they were paying attention. Season 3, episode 36, June 22nd.
I love the way you try to finesse that. Like, well, Rolland, are you going to consider that we've been doing this for almost like for 3 entire years? I'm like, no consideration. If you don't know my safe number, then I'm out.
That's perfect. And really, when you're sort of like, because we're the pop-up podcast sometimes, right? So you got to know. You know what it reminds me of? I don't know if this was a part of your backstory at all, but I used to be a part of a lot of the rave scene back in university days.
I never participated.
Yeah, so part of the rave, like I can remember some of the parties I came to in Toronto. I was coming from University of Guelph. We would sort of take the bus in, and all we knew was that we were probably going to be at a warehouse somewhere, but we just knew that the check-in point was kind of like at the corner of Yonge and Dundas, and you would wait and kind of check in there, and you'd kind of find out where you're going, because some of these warehouse parties were not legal, right? It was just sort of vacant warehouses where this party would pop up, and you sort of had to be in the right place at the right time to make sure you knew where you were going. Sometimes it was a little bit more formalized than that. Like we would sort of arrive at a spot, then we'd all get on a bus and we would go on a bus somewhere. Kind of scary when I think back now, but it was also the thrill of discovery. Like you just didn't know. And then you had to try and figure out how to get back home afterwards, because there usually wasn't a bus home. So you had to figure out how you're going to get from this space back to like downtown Toronto somewhere to get on a bus and kind of, in my case, get back to Guelph. So you know what? I'm going to agree with you. You just got to be on that corner, and you got to be looking for the dude with the red baseball cap. That is, and if you miss the person with the dude, the red baseball cap, then you're not going to the party. You're not going to the party.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was never part of that whole scene. I missed it. It was happening, and my friends were into it, and I just wasn't. It was one of those things where I'd go over and hang out with them pre-party. Like I'd go over, I'd be there for the chips and the pop, and they were doing other stuff, getting ready and I was just like, okay, you guys out? Okay, I'm out. See ya.
Often I'd be arriving at those sort of warm up, the on ramps to the evening out. I was arriving just as guys like you were finishing the chips and pop, because usually I was always working at restaurants. So
right.
It was convenient, right? So there was a whole lot of staff, a whole lot of hospitality staff that would be going to these after hours parties, because you're wrapping up at 12 midnight or 1 a.m. and you're ready to go. That's
awesome that you would say that, because I've got two things about that. The first one is, it reminds me of when I was younger. I had already established like a reputation. So when people would have parties, they would invite me. Well, we were friends, but they would invite me because they knew that I could polish off the food. So if like their parents were going to order a bunch of pizzas, they knew that, well, Rolland will take care of business if we're not like living it up on that end. So that's the one thing I remember, which is awesome. Pizza seems to be a theme at these parties. And then the second thing is, when I was driving the other day, I was out on the roads driving. I was actually going to pick up dinner, curbside pickup. And I was thinking about the things we order from the restaurants, and thinking about how I should really be consulting with you.
Me?
Yeah, because you could tell me, you can tell me things about the restaurant, the inside scoop on what I should order and what I should never order from a restaurant, based on your understanding. Like, for example, we got dinner last night. It was my son's birthday, and my wife saw on the menu that they had meatloaf, and she said it sounded like, she read it. She's like, yeah, I could go for that for dinner. I'm in the mood for something like that. And we called on Thursday to pre-order for Friday to make sure we were good. And I had a moment where I thought, okay, this is going to be good. And I'll tell you why. You could tell me if I'm right or not. I love how we're decoding restaurant stuff, but we're both teachers. But you're a chef, you work there, so you can help me here. So I say to the lady on the phone, this is for tomorrow. She's like, okay, no problem. We figure out the time, and I'm like, I'd like the meatloaf. And she's like, oh, well, let me check and see if we're going to be making any meatloaf tomorrow. And I'm like, this is a good sign, right? Because I'm getting meatloaf tomorrow. You're going to be making it tomorrow. It's going to be fresh and ready to rock. So here's my first question. how long would a restaurant, like let's say they made their meatloaf yesterday, and let's say they don't sell all their meatloaf. Do they dump it, or do they just put it away and then bring it back out the next day? And if somebody wants meatloaf, they'll just chop up the chunk that they will feed you and heat it up and send it home with you. Like, how does it work like that?
Well, I always go to the science. I was one of those chefs that, like, we can talk quality, we can talk magic, we can talk about tradition and the story behind the food and your inspiration for bringing in lavender from Normandy because it tastes the best in your particular ice cream. Like, I can do all that spot, but I find the core for something like that is always the science behind it. So here's the science. Typically, how big of a response do you want? But okay, so here's the kaleidoscopic answer. You decide what's of value to you. Making anything out of ground beef is inherently dangerous. It's an inherently dangerous food to work with. It has a lot of surface area. It has high moisture. It sits typically in its own blood. If the temperature isn't respected, you can have bacteria grow. There's a lot of stuff that can be in ground meat, okay? If they make their own ground beef, well, it's one step better. But if their machinery is not clean, as they make their own ground beef, you're in the same position. Ground beef in general, when you make a preparation like that, you want to cook it to medium well, right? So you're dropping into like 170 degrees, because at around the 170 degree mark, that's where most of the bacteria is dead. Like, you've done a good job of like totally sanitizing that piece of meat. So there's kind of the science behind it. If you make a food that typically, has high moisture and has, high protein in it, sometimes high fat helps as well, you're basically creating something that bacteria likes to grow in, especially if you leave it at room temperature. So the general rule is, and they may have updated these things since I've left the business, but the general rule was that within about 2.5 hours, you have to get that food, whatever you've made, out of the danger zone. And danger zone is just room temperature. But imagine you've cooked it, you hit the 170 degrees, you have to get it cooled down to like the 4-degree mark in under 2.5 hours to prevent any bacteria from growing in it. So if you make a meatloaf and you decide to just let it sit on the counter while it cools down, as soon as it hits room temperature, then at room temperature, you got colonies of things growing inside of it. Some of those things can be killed by reheating it. Others don't. There's ones that are actually, they're tough enough to survive really, really deep cold, and they're tough enough to survive really high heat, let alone some bacteria leave toxins behind. So you might kill the bacteria, but they leave their toxin behind. So when it comes to food safety, whether or not it's safe has to do with how the food is handled. If they make the meatloaf, they let it cool just for a little bit so that they can cut the piece and then get it spaced out on a tray and right into a cooling unit to take it down below 4 degrees, and then wrap it up and label it and date it and know exactly how long that's going to work. I mean, that will in itself, if it's kept cold, it will last a week in the fridge as it is, without much quality loss. After that, you do get breakdown. I mean, it does start to lose, whether or not it actually, bacteria is growing at the same time you're losing product quality and flavor. Like, it starts to compromise. If you freeze it, well, each kind of food item is different, but you could freeze it for a month and then go back through the reheat process, but then it's not fresh anymore, right? So you're not able to say, it's harder to say you're running out if you're cutting and freezing it. You're right. I would feel good about buying something from a place that said we're running out of, like, that's when I observe what started to happen almost immediately when restaurants were still doing their curbside, like the pull up, pop up, put it in your trunk, that kind of way that they were doing their food. And I would see certain places say they're running out of food. I was like, that is the perfect way to run. That is the ideal way to run a restaurant. If you can sell out of everything that you prep for the day, everything that's ready to go goes. And then if your clientele are willing to wait for the reload, well, that's just like utopia. And I don't think people were really prepared to entertain that until we hit quarantine. And then it became, everything was about scarcity. It was about, okay, I'm going to try, like I told you in the on-ramp, like we didn't even bother doing groceries online because we couldn't get delivery dates. And this was in the first 2 weeks when everything was really messed up with the systems. Nobody was really getting it right. So even you ordering your dinner the day before, like there was no possibility of that in the first 2 weeks when we left school. It wasn't like that. We put in our grocery order. It was so funny. We got through the whole thing and said, okay, here's your possible delivery date or even the pickup date. And it was 5 weeks down the road. I was like, okay, that doesn't work. Karen's like, what? I was like, yeah, 5 weeks down the road. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going for groceries. Let's bring it back to what you were saying. Yes, meatloaf sounds good. It does. And whether or not I would order it would probably be dependent on, the other stuff that came with it. Because for me, meatloaf is something that I can make very easily at home. Like you don't need a lot of extra equipment to do it. You don't need a lot of extra seasoning. If you're not prepared to make it, I could see how it's like, oh yeah, that's the thing I'm craving that I didn't even know I'm craving.
Right.
And for them to say, we're going to see if we're making it tomorrow.
Plus.
It is a plus.
Okay, that's good to know. So,
and at the end of it, had you called me 7-10 minutes later, you're like, Cliff, just tell me whether or not I should order it. But now it's on tape. Now it's on everybody now. There's Cliff rant on.
But I have to tell you, one of my favorite things about ordering out now is knowing that if you don't pre-plan, you're not going to get what you want because they're cooking it up and they're selling it out. And I love that because to me, and you'll tell me if I'm right or wrong. To me, that means that they're constantly making food. Like that's a good thing, right? They're constantly cooking the food that they have. So, or it always goes back to, okay, if you've got a chunk of ground beef sitting out for 3 days and then somebody orders a burger and they make the burger from that meat, you're screwed.
Yeah.
I guess is what you're saying.
That's the science, but I'm going to go a different route here because there's also FOMO. FOMO is a really powerful marketing tool. It kind of always has been. And in a lot of ways, there's this weird kind of connection between what you crave, the fear of missing out, and where you're willing to kind of become like I always forget what it means. What a stan, STAN? What is that? It's like it's not a fan, a stocky fan. Is that what it means? Like you're just willing to you want to be a lurker. You want to go right to lurker mode for certain restaurants because you're like, if I don't get those wings, if I'm not getting stuff from the Lank this week, my life is over, right? Part of that is the marketing. So initially, and this is something that I would have agreed with in the beginning because, like I said, we got in the first 2 weeks when we left school and everyone's like trying to figure out, okay, what's this new world going to be like? I was out in the grocery stores and I saw the shelves. I saw the spaces. Like I was the guy that was sort of on socials finding out, who in the area has seen the toilet paper being rolled out. And I'd be going to that store to try and get some, right? So I understood right away that scarcity was going to scarcity and market demand was going to drive what was left on the shelf. If you're a smart restaurateur, you're going to use that to your advantage because it's not as important for me to sell you in one shot $100 worth of ribs. It's more important for me to convince you need to come in twice a week to buy $30 each time. Because you come in, if you're prepared to come in twice a week, you're prepared to spend, you are actually potentially you're prepared to spend more money more times. So one of the phrases that popped up, it's not $100 once, it's $1 100 times. And because then you've got relationship. Then you've got someone potentially thinking to themselves that their week is ruined because they did not get the hot chicken sandwich from Chitty Cluck's, the Shack Out Back chicken shop, right? Chitty Cluck's. But here's so the idea that they could run out can be a marketing ploy just to mess with your head.
Gotcha.
So them, if they're being authentic and they actually are deciding to make meatloaf, they have to check to see if they're making meatloaf the next day. That's cool. But think about what that did to your state of mind as soon as you were told that. Think about how that, and
I
what,
get what you're saying.
And think about the, okay, so did you get the meatloaf?
Yes.
Okay, so think about what that feeling was like first when you were told that you might not get it.
Right.
And then when you were told that you could get it. And that's the $1 100 times FOMO element. Whether or not the meatloaf was good, you hope that the meatloaf was good, but it's still that you feel like you've been gifted something when all you've done is say you're prepared to spend the $25 on meatloaf and a side of mash with green beans, whatever it was.
Very interesting.
That's the marketing, and part of it is that's why I said it is a really cool, if it's an honest relationship between purveyor, the restaurant, and the clients, then telling someone that you have run out of something, it can go sour. So people can get really upset. Mm-hmm. But this whole very North American concept of abundance is borderline gluttony. And social media hasn't helped us to a degree because we believe that anything is possible anytime, anything's available anytime, which sometimes it is. But I saw full force of what sometimes it isn't when I couldn't get my groceries in the first 2 weeks. And then I would go to the grocery stores and the stuff wasn't there. I had to do some deep breathing because it wasn't anything anytime. Stuff was not there. And then I had to shift my purchasing. So we were getting different foods altogether, different like pharmaceuticals altogether, different soaps and stuff like that, because stuff just wasn't on the shelves initially. There was stuff there, at least in my neighborhoods that I have choice from. I was always able to get what I needed. Was I getting what I wanted? No. But I kind of flowed through that. Being out there, I saw the, wow, full shelving. Like, when was the last time? Do you have an lived experience of standing in a Walmart aisle and 75% of the shelves are empty? That's what that was. What that was like in the beginning, and no one was thinking, "Oh, I bet." There was a FOMO element to it. People were like, "I'm going to come back tomorrow," and that's kind of like the uninformed version. Just going back every single day, you're really spinning your wheels. The more informed version was socially connecting with people and using social media. There was like a toilet paper sighting at Walmart in Woodbridge. Go, 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 go. You're texting people, can you pick me up? No, they got a limit of 1. Can you go out to your car and come back? I can't, the lineup's too long. Like, I was in all those conversations. And part of it was more, it was a little bit gamified for me, because I was prepared and I had the privilege and I had the time to be able to go to different places. Mm-hmm. There's other people that, they don't have the car. They're not going to drive to multiple places. It has to be the metro that's right by their house. So
it's interesting that you say that, because I remember seeing all the pictures of the empty shelves. I remember seeing the pictures of the empty shelves.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it was you that I had this conversation with, but I used to work in a grocery store, and I read something that totally flipped my head back to the grocery store when I stocked shelves and worked in the back and stuff. And that is, on those shelves, you can't get a ton of toilet paper on them anyway, because the toilet paper is so big and the shelves are so they're so shallow that you can't. It's deceiving. When you look at a full shelf of toilet paper, it looks like there's a lot of toilet paper there, but there really isn't. So I remember reading that some guy was like, well, it's easy for the shelves to look bare because they only fit, like, the toilet paper section will only have 20 rolls max, depending on the size, yada, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting about that is you jogged my memory to my Costco run the other day. And I did get a package of toilet paper, and there was toilet paper as far as the eye could see. So I was like, that's cool, because I remember when we needed some, and I got lucky and I could get it online. Costco had it online, 1 per customer or 1 per card holder, and it was one of those it'll be delivered in 5 days. And I'm like, I don't care. I need toilet paper. And we weren't prepared to go out and drive from place to place to place. So we just ordered it. And so we were good that way. But the whole thing's interesting. You got me thinking about the restaurant marketing, that it's so simple that they could have had like friggin' boats of meatloaf in the back. But that whole bit of, hold on, let me see if we're making some tomorrow. Just that little tweak can do so much to somebody, right? Like that's very interesting. I don't believe that's what they did, but I'm not going to put it past business savvy people, right? Like that's what those things work. That's why people do them. But anyway, thank you for helping me out. I don't know how many minutes later we are, but that's interesting. Is there something that you would recommend I generally not order from a restaurant in this situation? Or does that not exist? Like, what's an item that's easily, aside from the ground beef and how you explained the science of that, is there something else that is scary to order?
Well, I sort of, I guess, like I would not order, like if I'm going to fish and chip shop, I don't order a burger. So it's anything can be terrible or horribly prepared or mishandled. I'll just say that flat out. And even the cleanest restaurants have room for improvement to sort of maintain. They call it like the food chain, like how things are handled from the moment they kind of like. And the food chain starts with whoever is your supplier, and then it goes back before that to the warehouses that it was in, and then goes back before that to the production facilities, and goes back before that to the farms. So this is one of the cool things that you see with some of these chef restaurateurs, where they are actively engaged with the local farmer to sort of say, this is the type of Sean Brock is a really cool chef that I would recommend to anybody to follow. He comes out of he's in Appalachia, Georgia, no, Virginia. Anyways, amazing chef, and he is fully immersed in his own food chain, as in he is connected with the farmers and the growers, and then he is part of the production line. And if there's sort of like prepared items, and then he's also running a restaurant, and then he's also active in the community. So he's got like connections through the whole food chain. And he focuses on Southern foods, and Southern foods that can be locally grown within his stomping ground, within his state. So he reps really well, and he's got a really great story, and he can be found on, he's got shows on Netflix, and he's got a really cool story. You should check him out. He's also kind of dabbles in photography as well, maybe of interest to check that out. So he's got a lot of different kind of things cracking off. I only mention that because depending on how immersed and how responsible and how connected the restaurant is in the food chain, like if everything is coming in boxed, if every single thing is coming in boxed through the back door, and the decisions about those items are happening at the franchise office, like any of the decisions that are made about the food happening in the restaurant, if they're made away from the restaurant, then it's easy for that restaurant to kind of make silly mistakes and not rep well. So for example, if the restaurant that you love to go to happens to be called, whatever your fish and chips place, and they're selling burgers, like I would not, just as a matter of practice, I would not be going to the fish and chip shop that I love and think to myself, they're repping a burger well. And I tend to kind of keep that in mind. As far as food items that I just typically don't ever order, just in general, I never order salads.
Why?
One, I find that the temperatures are never right. So it's never cold when it arrives. If it arrives dressed, it's wilted. As far as the actual, it's one of those items, unless you're there and they're making it for you, but if it's the thing that is sort of arrives from delivery, it tends to be one of those items that can be, you kind of you open it up and you're like, all right, well, I'm not going to send the order back just for the salad. Like you're willing to compromise, right? Like you look into, there's like, this is all iceberg. There's one tomato. Oh, but we got our salad. And then you look over at your ribs, you're like, at least the ribs are all good, right? So it becomes a second thought. Now, if the place is called Clough Salads, order a salad.
Okay. What about if it's a burger place and they have fish and chips? Don't get the fish and chips because they're a burger place?
I typically don't.
Okay, I'm just asking.
For me, I typically don't. I like to hold a restaurant accountable to what they say is their specialty.
Gotcha.
And if that sucks, I don't go back. Because I'm not going to say, I love going to this rib shop. I'm like, oh yeah, what do you get there? I always get the roast chicken. What? So you go to the, right? And it's just kind of the way I've gotten used to, or it's the wrong way to say it. I love being able to go to a space, go to a restaurant, and you and I did this. We did this. I was kind of dependent on you when I'd come out for dinner a few times, but I love going to a place. I told you, like, one of my rules is that there's family in the kitchen, and that some member of their family that's like old as trees in the back doing part of the cooking. Like, I really like that. I like that idea, at least, of believing in the heritage of the restaurant. But I also like going into a restaurant and they say, what would you like to order? And I say flat out, what should I order? I actually will say, if this is the only time I ever come to this restaurant, what dish should I have? And I go from there.
This is funny because you've come down at least 3 times and I've never taken you. We've never eaten Middle Eastern food. And that I've got a couple of places in mind where if you catch the door swinging open, and you see grandma in the back and she's friggin' making the rice or whatever. And you're like, this is legit. And I'm surprised because you've come so many times and we've not gone to a place like that. I mean, we have, but not like the Middle Eastern. It's just funny because the one time I was at the local one, there's one down the street, and I think the ownership's changed, but I still think they've got like little old ladies in the back, and the door will swing open and the lady will come out with like this big friggin' thing of rice, and she just made it and she's just getting it, moving it on to the next stage of, okay, how do we start serving this to people now?
Yeah. And that would be a place that you would go and they would say, we are out of.
Yes.
We sold out of.
Right.
There's a place, there's a shawarma restaurant close to me, and they make an amazing falafel, Like their tahini, their garlic sauce, their pickled vegetables are just like, my mouth is watering right now. And that's the other thing too, during this time, they're precarious. Like, I don't know if they're still in business, but they make an amazing sandwich. And that I've gone in a couple times. One of the things I love to get from them is they make these lemon spinach, like little kind of dumplings. They're like these flat dumplings, really high acidity to them. Now, I don't know if it's got sumac in it as well as lemon. Again, my mouth's watering. I can't tell how many times I've gone in there and they're like, yeah, we're sold out again. We're sold out again. To the point where I'm standing in line and I see them opening up the Tupperware container, giving the last 3. I'm like, oh. So I've been to that place where they don't have it. And what's unfortunate, here's the counter spin too, the way I talk about don't order the burger at the fish and chip shop. If the Lebanese restaurant is having to sell hamburgers in order to stay in business, that makes me sad. That makes me sad. Because this particular restaurant does have that. They do have they have a hamburger up on their menu.
But wouldn't you agree that part of that is you and your buddies go to get some food, and everybody's got the one buddy who just doesn't eat certain things and just won't, and so they're there with you, and I
don't give a crap about that buddy. I don't give a crap about that buddy. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah. So I flat do that because I will tell you. And so here's the dad style. I don't even care about that about my kids. If we go to a place, so here's an interesting thing. Here's an interesting thing of dad style, but it was also something that Karen and I worked out. We shifted our kids off of the kids menu easily 4 or 5 years ago. We said no. And of course, my son still falls back there. He prefers, the chicken. Because I asked my kids, I was like, what's on a kid's menu? And they're like, chicken fingers, pizza, macaroni. And they named off all the generic foods. And you kind of go to, any restaurant that kind of has a kid's menu. They have some variant of that, right? And I said, yeah, I turned to Karen. I'm like, yeah, we're done with this. We're done. We're done letting them order off the kids' menu, because their food literacy and their life literacy and their cultural literacy, they're going to end up that dude going out with someone like me and saying, don't they have burgers here? And someone like me is like, did nobody teach you better than this? So they've gotten used to, when we go out now, and often we're bringing food home because the portions are too big, but they're able to see a broader range of foods.
That's funny that you say that, because it's the same with me. Like, my kids, they have no interest in those foods anymore. And for a long time they haven't. Like, I know my oldest, he's like, I don't know how many years, he's 14 now, but I don't know how many years, probably when he was like 7, he's like, I don't want to order this stuff anymore. Like, you guys, because he would hear Sarah and I talk about the food and what we were really excited about getting. He's like, why am I eating like these slider burgers and French fries when you guys are having like these wicked meals? And then the same with Will, because he learned from his older brother, right? So he was even younger when he's like, I'm not eating this stuff. Like, when we go to hockey tournaments and I give him the kids menu, he's like, I don't want this. I'm like, okay, just let me know, like, look at my menu, let me know what you want, we'll order it. And it's such an interesting, like, societal social experiment, because the waitress is like, no, you have to pick from one of these 3 things because it's a team event. I'm like, no, he's not. Just okay. And then I look at her, I'm like, okay, well, I'm getting, and then I order 2 stuff. I'm getting this and I'm getting this. And she's looking at me now, she knows what I'm doing. I'm like, well, I don't want to argue with you. If he's sitting at that table and you're not gonna give him something off the real menu because he's one of the players on the team, then I'll order it for him. I don't want my kid eating whatever. I want him to get what he wants. So it's interesting that you say that. My boys are more about, it's like, yeah, they've seen it so many times. They're like, I'm not going here and eating this. I'm going here and eating this, what they're known for, or I want to try something different. Now, sometimes it's good to have the bland chicken fingers and fries, because sometimes they're just not in the mood. I'm like, okay, well, then get the chicken fingers and the fries so that we're all eating together, but whatever. I mean, I'll never forget the one time we went to a wing place, but they didn't really have wings on the kids' menu. And if they did, it was very little.
Yeah.
And my boy, my youngest, he just played a hockey game and is going to play another one in 4 hours. The kid wants to eat, right? And we have to be careful because you can't just stick him with tons of fried food. But he's like, we're in a wing place. I want wings. I'm like, okay. And he's like, I want this many wings. And I'm thinking, that's fine. So, and he got a salad because he had to have some greens. But now I know Clough doesn't like to eat salad in a restaurant, so I'm gonna have to think about that one.
No, the salad is like
hit and miss. It's the hit and miss.
Yeah, the salad will always be the hit and miss, but part of it is, salad isn't specific. Like salad, if you're in the restaurant, salad isn't specific to any place. The risk when you get salad in a restaurant, sometimes it can be the exact same thing. Like it's not a crafted salad. Like it's too much of one thing or not enough of another thing, right? But definitely if you get it delivered, it ends up becoming, like I said, wilty, too dressy. You don't get enough dressy. Like it's kind of it's an afterthought.
So anyway, I make sure that the kids get what they want, and I'm good with them eating off the regular menu. Funny story. I don't know how many years ago, maybe 2 years ago. A year to 2 years ago, the kids wanted to go to a restaurant that Sarah and I always go to when we go out, like on a date. So when we get someone to watch the kids, we go to this restaurant because we love the food's always good. It's always quality. The service is great. And when it's not great, we make it known and they fix it fast. Because that's the thing too. Like, we don't feel weird telling them, I've been waiting a really long time for a beverage. Like, We come here because it's quality, and you guys are not showing that today. And they fix that fast. And we don't have to do that often there, but we do it because we're like, this is ridiculous. Like, we go out once every like 5 months. We're spending our money and our time here, and you guys are dropping the ball large. So anyway, the kids are always like, when are you going to take us there? When are you going to take us there? So something happened. There was some kind of relatively special occasion. We told them, okay, we're going to go here. We're going to bring you with us. And they have a kids menu, but it's not the stereotypical kids menu. Like, this is a steakhouse and they have steaks, but not the size of my head for my 10-year-old type of thing, right? Like, the portions are different for the kids. They're much more kid friendly. Anyway, we get there, and it was awesome because both of my kids were like, okay, Dad, you're always talking about the ribs. Mom, you're always talking about the steak. Show me where to look, because that's what I'm getting. And it was a proud moment. It was like, okay, my kids are they get this food thing. They're in a place where they've heard Mom and I talk about it forever. And they're not here to just get the chicken fingers and the French fries. Like, they want to eat the foods that we talk about. They want to eat the foods that they see us bring home our leftovers. And like, oh my God, that looks like real food. And we're like, don't touch it. Because they wake up and they go right for the leftovers. And we're like, you're not touching that food. First of all, it cost a fortune. Second of all, that's my food, and we don't get to eat that often. So it was nice to have them they were dressed up and they weren't acting like doofuses, because we told them you can't act like that here. And it was nice. It was a nice dinner in a place that my wife and I really like. And the kids, it was funny. The waitress didn't even think twice. Like, when my 13 or 12-year-old son at the time was looking at the menu, he ordered his meal. She did not look at us like, that's off the regular menu. Like, she's like, yes, sir. That's what you're ordering. That's what you're going to get. And treated them both like, there's nothing worse than a waiter or a waitress that looks at the kid and is like, oh, that's not on the kid's menu. It's like, well, obviously I'm letting my kid pick what he wants. But when the waiters and the waitresses start to police and start to parent, it's like, oh, come on. This isn't your role. Your job is to serve me, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I just mean, I don't need you parenting.
That's why they're called servers. Those are called waiters, servers, waitresses. I mean, that's yeah.
So anyway, you and I fall in the same place there. It's funny. Yeah, my kids. One more funny thing. My kid will be the one, my youngest, like at a hockey tournament or whatever. When he orders his food and it comes, the rest of the kids are looking at him. They're looking at me, and they're like, does your dad know you ordered that? And he's like, yeah, I talked to my dad about it. I said, this is what I'm getting. Like, the one restaurant we went to, Will just felt like having nachos, but he wanted the adult size nachos, and he wanted it loaded, like fully loaded. So I'm like, okay, go nuts. So it comes, and this plate that was like, 5 kids' plates equaled this thing. And all his friends were like, can I have some? Can I have some? He's like, of course you can have some. So he lets his friends have some nachos or whatever. And then he eats. And when he's done, he's done. And we packed it up. And we were in a hotel for just one night. But he had some like later on after dinner. Then he had some for breakfast. Then he had some for lunch. Like, that's how big this thing was. And he's an eater. And he's like, you're not going to eat my nachos, right? I'm like, no, I'm not touching your nachos. So,
well, you might be thinking dad style. It's saving me on meals out. Like, if you go at it, like,
when you're staying in a hotel and stuff, that's the thing. There needs to be a balance, in my opinion. There needs to be, you got to have the fun junk food, because that's part of the experience for me. But then you also can't go nuts. Like, if you're there for a sporting event, I tell them, like, depending on the times of your games and what's happening and whether you look sluggish or not, you can order the salmon and rice off the adult menu. Go nuts, but you're not getting, the wings before like this game or that game or whatever, because you need to fuel your body.
Yeah.
Fuel your body. And that's important. So I want you to eat. Like, at breakfasts are hilarious. So we'll go for like an 8 a.m., 7 a.m. hockey game. Then we go out as a team for breakfast. And I'm like, you are getting eggs because you need protein or whatever. Like, you're not just going to get the 5 chocolate chip pancakes and chocolate milk. You need to fuel your body. And he's like, okay, Dad, I want eggs. This is the type of meat I'm going to get. And I'm like, awesome. You get a well-rounded breakfast with the things you need. And if you can't finish it, I'll polish it off, or we'll just leave it. Like, I want you to fill yourself, fuel yourself. But it's funny because there's always a kid who's arguing with their parents. I want the pancakes. I want the chocolate. I want the 5-stack chocolate chip pancakes. And the dad's like, you're not going to be able to move in 2 hours. That's your next game. Like, you can't skate. So no, you're not eating that. Have the omelet or whatever. And Will just looks at me. He's like, it's funny. He just looks at me. He's like, yeah, I'm not going to fight with you. This isn't the place to do that. I know how you roll. Because I will say, okay, we're out of here then. Like, that's the thing. He knows his dad's a jerk, right? So I'm not going to play these games. If you're going to mess around, you're going to lose because you're 9 years old. Like, it doesn't work. You're not going to win here.
Mm-hmm.
So play ball. Meet me halfway. But for breakfast, he has no problem. You should see this kid. He will just hoover that food, and he'll make sure he gets enough good stuff in him that he's ready to rock. Because there was one time where he did not perform at the next game. And I just said to him, I said, listen, I said, everybody has a bad game, but you played like garbage. And we're not staying over in Niagara Falls so that you can play like garbage. So it's funny because when he knows, he'll say, yeah, that was not good. And by far, I'm not that parent. But hey, if you have a horrible game, like horrible, every shift is bad, it's like, okay, well, we need to look at the situation. You need to reflect on what's going on. So we have this unwritten contract of how we operate when we go on hockey tournaments or whatever. But I laugh. I look at the other kids at the dinner, they're getting the pizza and the chicken fingers, and I'm laughing because sure, mom and dad are paying $4.99, but they get this much food, and then an hour later, they're like, "I'm starving."
Yep.
You know? Yeah. So we don't roll like that anymore. I didn't want to spend that much time on Restaurant Talk, but I like it because you and I don't get to talk about this stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I just need to know.
I want to shift to something though.
Shift.
I want you to tell me a little bit about so the video that you posted up this past week. Not the one about going into the classroom.
Yes.
Dude, like did it get 2,000 views?
You know what? It's sitting at like 8,500 views now.
I thought that was really cool. And it was just so when I checked in at some point, it was like, yeah, around the 2,000 mark. That's cool. And it looked like it gave a few people some feels.
That still gives me some feels. And
yeah.
I wasn't expecting to feel how I feel. I can't really watch it because it takes me somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I know I told you this. I told you that when I get back into my classroom, I'm bringing my camera and I'm capturing the moment.
Yep.
Because I feel a couple of things. I feel like I've dropped the ball on a lot of moments since this whole thing's happened. And that's not to say that, like, when I say that, I just mean like I had opportunities to reflect and to grow, and I dropped the ball. So on this one, I wasn't going to drop the ball because I seriously couldn't remember how my classroom was before I left. Mind you, I did make a comment to somebody. My classroom was a little bit more tossed around than it was when I left. When I leave for a Friday, my class is in order for Monday, and it didn't look like that. It looked quite disheveled. So every now and again, I wonder what happened. Who was in my room? Who did what in my room? Because things happened in my room that they weren't like that when I left. And when I watched the video, when I was making it, I was like, why is my calendar all messed up?
Mm-hmm.
Why is the cart that sits beside me with my pens and stapler and stuff, why was it moved over here and not straight? Like, there was a lot of interesting things about my classroom. But anyway, because people are probably looking at this like, this guy's dirty. This guy is like not organized. No, my room, when I leave on a Friday, part of our job at the end of the day is to tidy up the room and to make it look like a stereotypical classroom for Monday morning.
Reset the room.
Yeah, we reset. We make sure it's good to go for Monday. Anyway, so one of the reasons I did not want to drop the ball, I didn't know what I was going to create. I just knew that I wanted to capture, literally, like, I had my camera on the tripod, and I came in, I'd be working. I'm like, oh, no. I grab the camera, turn it on, and just get 10 seconds of video or whatever. Because I'm like, that is doing something to me right now. That is doing something to me right now. How I'm feeling when I look at these stack of papers, oh, something's going on here. So I did that. And then I came home. And then in my downtime, I started to look at what I captured and to start to think and reflect. And I started writing down the things I was thinking, like my wonderings. There were some things I was just like, why were all those anchor charts on the desk? They obviously fell off the wall, but they've never fallen off the wall before. So who was in my room doing what to cause them to fall off the wall? Like, there was these things, right? And then I just started piecing it together. And then I wasn't happy. I was feeling sad. I was feeling nostalgic. So I found music to meet how I was feeling. And I put it together, and it was one of those things that, like, I'm sharing this for a couple of reasons. Number one, it was part of my creative side, so I wanted that out there. So it's on our Decoded site, and I put it on Twitter, but that's usually where I share my stuff. So I wanted to share it because it's part of my creative side. It's part of my creative artifacts, if you will. And I felt like other people were saying similar things about walking into the classroom and having it. What it is there were too many artifacts left behind in a certain state of being that when you look at it, brings you right back to that day.
Yeah.
Because it was set up, like, I can't speak for others, but when they talk about it, I get the feeling my science rubrics with my kids' work were sitting in a particular place to jog my head so that when I walk back to the classroom April 6th, oh, that's got to be done today. And I'd pick them up and I'd put them to the next station that would help me keep my head in the game. Field trip letters were sitting here because that's where they go when they're done. So I needed to remember, oh, if a kid gives me one, okay, grab it, put it here, check it off. Like, everything has its place for a particular reason in my classroom. And I'm like, oh, shoot, the field trip, turn on the camera, capture the footage. Oh, the science rubrics. And I'd just be like, well, shot that out of the water. That's game over. Get that. So anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't let you ask your question or finish your idea. I just started to run with, like, what you were talking about. I showed it to my wife, and I said, she's like, oh my God, this is so sad. And I'm like, well, that's where I was. And I've said this several times over the past couple of months to you. That's where I'm at. Like, I've got the days that I'm feeling really awesome, and I've got the days that I'm not feeling so awesome. And when I was in my classroom, I was getting the work done. I was doing what I was there to do. But the camera was helping me capture the moments that brought me, like, a twinge of, like, sadness or, like, regret or whatever you want to call it. And because I recorded that moment in time, I was able to revisit it and deal with my feelings and my reflections when it was more appropriate to do so.
The video, couple things just to drop, because we don't often talk about the tech. Just so anyone listening, you did this on your phone, right?
No.
Your phone and your camera, you grabbed the footage
I brought in my DSLR.
Did you do the editing on your phone?
Yes.
I think that's and part of it, just, I don't know if you've ever spoken about your actual creation process. But if people are checking out the Decoded creative pieces, you have, I mean, up to this past few months, you've been doing all of your capture and editing just on your phone.
Yeah.
And I know you introduced me to the Video Leap app, which is great. Like it runs hot on my phone. Like it's using the resources, but it is a good app for like if you're starting out. I mean, there's other ones too. I mean, I've tried out using iMovie and other stuff, but I like the Video Leap. But yeah, just if people are looking at that, how do you put it together and they want to start? You can start. You can, because Video Leap even does, I think there is a free Video Leap. You can go and start messing around with video that way. The second thing that it brings to mind is, do you remember, you must remember the black. So I'm going to go back to restaurant talk for a second, just for a moment. Do you remember the blackouts? The blackouts, what was it, of 2003?
Yeah.
I think it's 2003. Is it 2003? I think so.
It was around there because I was living here. It was 2002, 2003.
Okay. So at that time, I was still running the restaurant. So we were still downtown running the restaurant. And in a very close succession amount of time, we had actually had, prior to that, you remember when Dundas Square was being built? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But I mean, I was working the restaurant when they were doing Dundas Square. And that construction of Dundas Square was causing a lot of headaches in the core. So I was working in a restaurant in the Eaton Center. So one of the things that happens in the Eaton Center, don't know if it's still like this, and not a lot of people would necessarily know this, but because it's because the fire system is an integrated system in the actual mall, when the fire alarm goes off, it goes off everywhere. And one of the things that they have in it is that, and schools have this as well, that there was a, as was explained to me, there's a minimum decibel level that has to be achieved with fire alarms, emergency alarms within, let's say, public spaces. So what that means is, if you've ever been in a school and you're just like, oh my God, it is so loud, part of that is a compensation factor for all the concrete walls. So you might have some spaces where it's louder and some spaces where it might be not as loud, but overall there has to be a level of decibel level so that you can actually hear that there's an emergency happening. So this would happen in the Eaton Center often. So there could be something, we were in the south end, something could happen in the north end, and the emergency system would kick in for the whole mall. So the first blackout that we had was when they were doing the building of Dundas, the Dundas Square, and they clipped a gas line. So they had to cut the electricity for all of the Eaton Center. Nowhere else, it was localized, right? The second one, I think happened, the bigger one that was like all over Ontario, Southern Ontario. Between the first one and the second one, we put together something called a crash kit. And the crash kit was our way to not only, it was multi-layered. And when I say the crash kit, think big idea, and then we had small kind of like versions depending on what we needed. So we had a crash kit for the front bar. We had a crash kit for the bathrooms. We had a crash kit for the dining room. We had a crash kit for each of the kitchens. And the crash kit basically was not only procedures and protocols, it was equipment that we might need. It was list of contact numbers, and we had these all kind of organized. We started to organize them like what, so we were ready to kind of stay on track, no matter if we ran into a loss of power. Now that second loss of power was far more pronounced than the first one. The first one was like an hour and change, and we were back up and running again. And they didn't make us evacuate the first one. They didn't make us empty the restaurant. We just had to shut down the kitchen for a short amount of time, because in the kitchen at that particular restaurant, we had a live wood grill. And what happens is a live wood grill puts off a lot of smoke. And when the emergency system kicked in, it turned off the hoods. And the hoods are the vacuum system to draw all the smoke out of the restaurant. So as soon as they turned off the hoods, boom, we started to get smoke in the restaurant. So needless to say, we came out of that having to build crash kits that would not only allow us to kind of evacuate with emergency protocols, make sure everyone was safe, make sure everyone was good to go. It's no different than the binders that would be in a school when you have, fire drills, and lockdown procedures. Your video brings to mind, and I circle back to the video, the what ifs for September, and the announcement of having to prepare for 3 different potential styles of school is only one half of the challenge. So whether or not we're starting out, or we start in, or we have a hybrid system, that's the on-ramp to it. What strikes me as the more powerful piece of this, because we have figured out those versions. I think everyone kind of figured out those versions when we had to leave. So people are doing different versions of distance learning. They're doing different, hybrid, whatever that is. I remember when we first left school, there were some boards that I don't think I'm going to assume I'm wrong, but at the time there were some boards that just did not have the infrastructure for some kids to get tech, to be able to use tech. The quick flip was then they were giving out the mobile phones with data, so that even in the more rural areas, who knows what the fidelity was like, but even in the rural areas, kids could do their digital work. Prior to that, some of those jurisdictions, I had read a story online that the schools were using the school bus system, gathering paper copy of packets of work for the kids, driving the school bus, and the teachers would sort of drop them off in the mailboxes. So they had a crew that was doing these drop-offs. So I think we've kind of thought through all the possible versions. So I'm not worried about trying to figure out what the 3 versions to start will be. And I'm not too bugged with even the announcement around we don't know which one will work best, because on one hand I do kind of agree, school boards I think need to be able to decide where they're at in this space. What is the version? And the numbers are different depending on school boards as far as infection, and whatever is the trigger point that says we're doing version A, now we got to move to B, now we need to know C. I get that as a local. Where I'm interested now is the conversation around the crash kit. And how do we move between systems? How do we go from, if we are out, what does our moving from out to in look like? Because here's the one thing that's happening within this. The movement between the systems is going to be two different elements moving at the same time. You have where the teachers are, and you have where the students are. Because a teacher can move from in class to out of class, but you could have students that were never in class. Or you have teachers and students out of class, teachers brought back into class, and some of the students that were out decide not to come in. So that whole crash kit comes to mind when you're telling me about looking at, you're going back and almost you're being triggered by the work that was left behind. You're looking at school field trip forms. You're looking at assessment, A&E things you have to take care of. You're going back and wondering, what is it that happened when we were away? You're in this constant state of investigative assessment as to where was I, what happened, where was I when I left, what happened while I'm away, and how do I almost impossibly start to gather myself into this new reality? And I'm hoping that we do have some conversations that kind of leave behind some of the distance learning discussion at this point and get more into how do we discuss about how do we, with some agility, move back and forth between systems. It's almost like academic code switching, because how you operate in the class will not, even if you're doing high digital teaching in class, it is a different freeway altogether to sort of switch to an entirely digital platform. And we've seen that, the speed bump, we know that for the most part, teachers made it okay. Teachers made it okay. I get it, there's some whiplash. There's definitely whiplash. There's individuals that did not make it, did not translate well, but the compliance piece motivated people to either suffer or make it work. Maybe some other teachers flourished, but for the most part, they suffered or they made it work. Didn't like it, but suffered, but made it work. That's not the same to be said with the kids. And I don't think that just because some kids this semester, I say semester, that's what my school board is, some kids this semester, I don't know if the lesson learned going back into September will be how to do it better. I think the lesson learned is that they can't do school like that, and it won't matter. So that whole agility piece, I'm kind of mesmerized by it, because whatever version we're adopting when we go back in September, different school boards could potentially be in different versions. So we're going to have this really kind of like tapestry, like fragmented startup, depending on what version each school board is adopting. And then when we have to shift, it's immediate. Like there's no more space anymore to say, okay, we're going to take a couple days and figure this out. It is going to be, the numbers are now up, infection rates are up. We leave on a Friday, we switch to a different system on Monday. Go. And that crash kit, what that crash kit looks like, I would love to have conversations around that, because I don't think it'll be that. And even though we've gone through it once, I don't see it as a simple kind of like gear shift. The whiplash, I think, is going to be quite profound for some people. Let alone for the fact if we start in and have to go out, there's a whole big, even if we don't like being in the school, there's something very human and relieving to be back in the system. We're doing it like we used to, right? We're back in the game again. And then to be told now we're leaving, like there's some pretty powerful emotional whiplashing that can be going on with that, let alone the sort of pedagogical and just structural.
Well, because it's going to remind us of the trauma that we experienced leaving in the first place.
Trigger time, totally triggered, right?
And so what you just talked about brings two things to my mind. The first one is corner cutting. I'm sorry, I'm going to say it, but in education, we are famous for cutting corners, because what we want to do can't be done right most of the time because of the time it takes and the red tape that exists. Because education systems are so slow in moving forward because of the hierarchy and the politics, and so we're always behind. Tech's a great example. Usually we're behind in tech because we just can't keep up. We don't have the funding, the hierarchy, the politics. There's all kinds of games going on. So one of the things I'm concerned about, and I'm going to be looking at, is corner cutting. People are going to cut corners because, hey, this has to get done. We're going to try to make it happen. We're going to put some protocols in place, but people are going to ignore the protocols. That's number one. And then, you know what? I don't care what anybody says. I've been doing this for 18 years. I think I have enough capacity built in me and enough experiences that I can tell you what I've seen during times of non-emergency. Now we're in an emergency. Things are like heightened, and I think we're still going to cut corners. Number one. The second thing is around, I think I lost it, cutting corners and, collective agreements. I have a feeling that the way things might shift is, it's funny, all of a sudden now people are like, well, we're in an emergency mode, so we shouldn't be following collective agreements. Here's my idea with collective agreements. If we're not going to follow teacher collective agreements, then we're not going to follow EA collective agreements, and we're not going to follow CUPE collective agreements, because you can't bust one agreement and not bust the others. And I'm not gonna dig deep into why I say that, because it'll give too much information that I don't want out of my little brain. But I will tell you something. There's a collective agreement in place for a reason. It's there to make sure that people are protected on both sides. It's there to make sure people get what they are supposed to get, and that due process happens for certain things. So if you're going to expect teachers to ignore a collective agreement, then you're going to need everybody to ignore their collective agreements, because you can't keep adding stuff onto a teacher's plate and saying, make this happen. I know it goes against this agreement part, but look at the times we're in. Okay, look at the times we're in. So I need that group now to start breaking their collective agreement, because look at the times we're in. You want me to do this, this, and this. Well, if we break their agreement, then I can make this work a lot easier and a lot faster. So I see some dangerous lines that are probably going to be crossed. I've already seen I've seen the dance, right? People won't come out and say do this, but they want you to do something. And some collective agreements aren't as strong as others. So for example, principal administrators, their agreement's different than our agreement. So, and I see once you become an administrator, you're in a whole new realm. You're in a new realm. It operates differently. I get that. And I get like maybe one day I'd like to become an administrator, but I'm not there yet. So I'm living my reality now, and I'm living within the agreements that were collectively bargained and agreed upon that I belong to. I agree with some things and I disagree with other things, but my point is that I don't think this is going to be done as safe as it's supposed to be. People keep saying safety, 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 but then when they look at what has to happen to maintain safety, they don't like it. So they're going to cut corners. And people are going to expect other people to do things because of the times we're living in that goes against our collective agreement. But it's okay for one group to not follow their collective agreement, but it's not okay for other groups to stop following theirs. I don't appreciate that. If you want me to do certain things outside the realm, or I'm inferring that you want me to do things outside the realm of my collective agreement, but all the players around me in the periphery, you don't expect them to do the same. That's not cool. So this is going to be interesting for me to see how this works. Very interesting for me to see how this works. And I know I'm coming at this kind of from a negative lens, but it's because of my experience. It's because of what I just experienced in this remote teaching experience, and 18 years worth of teaching and seeing how the system works and where people flex the system, where people ignore the system, and how slow the system can be. So thanks a lot to the ministry for giving us the 3 options that existed 2 months ago. And once again, it's on the boards now to decide, how do we make this work? How do we create a plan, contingencies for all 3 of those options that we were given by the ministry? That one of them could happen, 2 of them could happen. We don't know. I just, if as teachers we ignore our collective agreement, then we have a problem on our hands. I don't see other people ignoring their collective agreement. And that's all I can say. I can't say any more. See, this is a moment where I know I'm fully aware this is live, this is being recorded, and that's all I can say. I'd love to have you and I probably have had lots of one-on-ones where you know exactly what I'm thinking, why I'm thinking it, what I've seen and heard. But I will tell you, nobody's come out and told me not to follow the rules. Nobody's done that.
No.
But I tell you, I can make inferences, and I can see what other people are doing, and I know why they're doing certain things that they're doing. They're getting stuff done. That's all I want to say about that. We do have one viewer, though. I see on my screen there's one person watching this right now. So
who is it?
I don't know. I don't know how to find that out. I just see.
It would be funny if it was my mom.
Really?
Only because
it's probably Carlos. He likes to jump in here and there.
Let's see if someone will message us, tell us who's out there. But the only reason I say that is that out of the blue, this past week, she emailed me and she says, how did she ask it? Where's she didn't say send me the link. She didn't use the jargon. She didn't use the jargon like send me the link to your podcast.
Right.
It was something like, where do I have to go?
Oh.
Where do I have to go to watch your podcast? You know what I mean? So it was sort of like, I knew what she was asking, but your brain kind of goes, okay, but in this case, it was kind of on point because I said, well, you can actually watch it. You could watch the live feed, but I gave her just the link to the playlist and then gave her the link to Squirrels. Cause I actually didn't know which one she was talking about, to be honest.
Right.
Like we're talking about 5-6 years of body of work. I've mentioned to her at least once a year that I kind of do this thing. Who knows? But it would be kind of funny if it's my mom.
Interesting. Well, if it's your mom, I'm sure she'll let you know, right?
Rolland, do a shout out for my mom just in case. Do a shout out.
Why would I do it? It's your mom.
My name is Lucy. Say, hey, Lucy, how you doing?
Your mom's name is Lucy?
Yeah.
So is mine.
Nice. Yeah.
What's up, Lucy?
There we go.
That was weird. talking to Clough's mom. It's probably Carlos. Carlos is famous for jumping in here and there. I mean, if he could post a comment, anybody who's watching this right now on YouTube Live,
that could be,
post a comment.
That could be our new safe word too. If
What?
you're in, so we gave them a little sort of like a latchkey for the end of the episode, Lucy. So
Lucy's the safe word for the end. Okay.
That they like how Sesame Street used to do this. Sesame Street was brought to you by the letter L and the number 2. So this is brought to you by your number. What was your number? 76.
Oh no, this is brought to you by number 76.
The
letter W for Wednesday.
Yeah, and Lucy.
And Lucy. Those are the 3 things.
Can I drop one thing on the end? Just
before you drop what you're going to drop, I want to drop something too, and then we'll shut it down. Go for it. Me?
Oh, you want me to go first?
Sure.
Okay. Just the really dig in the Our Dad Shoes project.
Oh yeah.
That's the thing I got going on. Shout outs to Voice Ed and Stephen Hurley and Doug Peterson, because they were repping the Our Dad Shoes and having some pretty. I liked listening to the conversation around fatherhood and the elements of the different posts that the dads have posted up. It was just really cool to hear. I mean, I'm getting a lot of complex feels off of this project, and whenever someone is sending me a piece, it takes me quite a bit of time to kind of make it through it, because when you were a part of it, you sent something in, and I was like, it took me a little while to make it through the whole thing, because it connects. It just connects. It connects to these pieces, some of my philosophies of fatherhood and thinking about my own dad. So appreciating all the participants, all the contributors. Appreciate Hurley and Peterson for the shout outs on This Week in Ontario. This week.
Ontario blogs or something like that?
EduBlogs? I think it's EduBlogs. I'm trying to think of the acronym that they use. But yeah, that's really cool. And just to say that this is something that, although it is ramping up just under Father's Day, so I wish that to you. Happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day.
Same to you.
Thank you. It's something that I'm going to keep going. So, this isn't just about trying to get a bunch of posts out under the wire and make it about a single celebration. This is something that I'm going to keep working on and promoting to just kind of expand the space where we can talk about fatherhood. So lots of good feels and deep respect for people that are participating and those that are promoting and kind of pushing the project out there.
I think your dad's shoes project is it's really cool. When you told me what you were kind of thinking, I was like, that's awesome. It reminds me of, the personal projects people do. And I told you about mine, about my buddy Jamie, the vice principal and the board, and how we're going back and forth and making videos based on prompts that we're providing each other. It's just fun, man. It's just 2 teachers having some fun and being creative and kind of it's a cool space. So I get it. Your dad's shoes project that I was really happy to be able to contribute to. I see it as it's one of your personal projects. It brings you joy. You enjoy doing it. You enjoy talking to people about it. So every time I see you, pushing it on Twitter or Instagram, and Facebook, I'm like, this is cool. This is it's such a cool project, right? And it's not mine. So it's really neat to step back and to really see you kind of dive into it and put it together. And, I look at the website and I look at the cool graphics you make, and I get that you're not doing those things because you feel like, oh, I got to put out a graphic. You're doing it because you're like, this is cool. You're just playing around with stuff. And
it's true. Thanks for noticing. It is true. I've started to realize that working with some of those graphics, I'm using Canva. Canva's cool. It's a really cool, it's all free. The Canva graphic stuff that I'm putting out there for the thumbnails that are for Insta and the stuff that I put on Twitter, it's the amount of tools that you get up front to be able to start messing around with that stuff. I feel I feel like there's enough of a sandbox there for me to mess around in. So
That's cool. I get it. I get it. And I'm glad that you brought it up. What I wanted to talk about right before the end is Father's Day.
do
So
it.
it ties perfectly into what you're talking about. I just wanted to hit you up and wish you a happy Father's Day as well, and happy Father's Day to any of the guys listening who are dads, and even some of the, if you don't identify as a male, but you are in a father figure role.
Yeah.
Word up, happy Father's Day to you too. Um, I never got that. I never understood that until I became a teacher, and I met students who had two moms, or I met students whose grandfather was taking care of them. And now I've not met a student with a parent who doesn't identify as a male, but may look like one. I've not experienced that as far as I know, but I want to acknowledge that there may be people who are like that. And that's, hey man, it's all good. So happy Father's Day to anybody acting like what a father should do or does do with their kids or whatever, even if they're not your kids, but you're a father figure. Happy Father's Day. This Father's Day, man, I think it's going to be different for me.
Yeah.
And I think this whole COVID thing has opened me up, like emotionally, and really, I think my EQ I think it's shot through the roof over the last 3.5 months, because I think I've been doing some good work that led to the pandemic. And then with the pandemic, I've had a lot of time to think and to experience different things, and to reflect on certain things that I've never really took the time to reflect. So I feel like my EQ's kind of shot up. And I think that with this Father's Day, it's going to rub me a little bit differently, because, I'm going to think about my dad, and I have been thinking about my dad a lot. And it's funny, the thoughts I've been having about my dad, I want to bring out in a video form. I just don't know. This is a cool thing. I don't know what it's going to look like, or I have some ideas about what I'm thinking and what I would like to, how I would like to bring those thoughts to life in like an artistic, creative way. But I'm going to do my best to soak up this Father's Day as a father, and then reflecting on my dad and how our connection came to be and what it was like and how it still is, even though he's not around. So I just wanted to kind of drop that there. I have to say, before you show us what you drew, I've got the perfect title for this week's episode. So this is what I want to. It's going to be called Lucy 76 Wednesday, and 76 will be like Lucy's nickname. So that's Lucy 76 Wednesday.
I feel like it's like that. I always wanted to know what the CB handle was, like, CB language, where the whole Charlie, Alpha, yes, Foxtrot, like that. It feels like it's that. Yeah. We're sort of creating our own pod
language,
pod jargon.
Nice. So what did you create this week? Oh, cool. Very cool. And what brought you to that?
I've just been kind of swept up in the whole, I think part of it is, I remember somebody telling me, so for those not seeing the video, it's, I think it's called a slate. I think that's what you call it. It's like a movie slate, like take 5, and you sort of do the clap on the top of it, and it's a way to mark film, right? So right. You kind of, it's a visual demarcation in film. So when you're editing real quick, you know what you're about to get. I've just been thinking, and between your video and thinking about how we're going to, how are we going to organize everything that we've learned? I think it was the announcement, the Lecce announcement, the Ministry of Ed announcement. How do we, what tools do we even have to be able to organize what we've learned from the last 3 months in order to put it together in a way that we are feeling well about September? Because no matter the plan that they give us, make no mistake, this is going to be on educators' shoulders and backs to figure out in the exact same way we didn't have any clear indication how to leave. I get the sense we're not going to get the clear indication on how to transition back in. And I don't mean about the safety. I mean bringing education back into a building. And it's not the physicality of it, it's the spirit. How do we bring that spirit of education back into a building? And then, like I said, with the crash kit, how do we then pack it up, PDQ, and get it out of the building, and then maybe bring it back in again? So what does the whole yo-yo, I was going to do, my original thing was to try and make a yo-yo, but I thought the whole take two, and I actually had to look up, I didn't know, because this is the, I feel like this will be the graphic as well, because this is our season 4, episode 1. So I'm like, because that's what we're going to be talking about when we make it back that week. So yeah, that's what kind of got me thinking about that.
That's cool. Thanks for sharing that process. I like that.
What's going to be the marker? What's going to be that marker? Clap. So, dude, 76 Wednesday, Lucy, or I forget the order.
Lucy 76 Wednesday.
Okay, Lucy 76
or you
Wednesday.
Call it whatever you want, but that's what I'm calling it.
No, I like that. I like the mystery. People are going to look at that as a title and like, what?
Maybe they'll listen to this one.
Maybe. At least, well, we've given them the passcode. So.
Okay. Okay. Have a good one. Have a great Father's Day.
You as well. Happy Father's Day. Take care of yourself.
You too. See ya.